We've got about 10 minutes for some questions and answers. I'll just let Alex and Dom get sat back down there. And there is a sort of something that occurred to me just as you started to do your bit about methodology, and you talked about the journey, and that was common across the three papers. I also thought there was one thing else that was common, and that was observations and our interpretation of that word, because in Bally's case, observation is a critical part of initial teacher education. The dreaded TP observation is where we first kind of encounter that, and then your focus on observation as a kind of way, a means of judging people and making judgments or not, indeed. And then the research of the use of observation as a research tool, and then sort of it all being part of this CPD thing. So hopefully we've got some questions that you might like to ask any of our four presenters, I should say, something else. JPD in action, I know. Okay, and if you'd just like to say who you are and direct your question over to you. So, thank you.
National Official Persons in Education Detail. It's for Nick. The definition of CPD, I need to have it because that's counter to every survey we've ever done in terms of practitioners doing CPD. They come back and say we're doing 60 hours a week, so it's off the scale, and they're eager for it. So what was the definition in the questions about?
I left it as the normal terminology of continuing professional development. So you probably go back to the IFL, what counts as CPD for 30 hours. So I haven't gone beyond that or tried to refine that at all.
Because that was expansive, wasn't it?
Yes.
So it's very surprising.
I was.
Yes, Susan?
Well, just following up on that point, I mean, it's really interesting in actually how teachers themselves define CPD. Nick left it open for them, and wondering about the definitions. Because when I did a focus group with our teachers, we asked the question, how do you develop yourselves professionally? And that's how we phrased it. How do you develop yourself professionally? And out of 25 teachers, not one mentioned the 8 days of mandatory staff CPD they attend every year. That was really eye-opener. I haven't decided what to do with that yet. But so obviously, the way that we look at CPD is not homogenous among practitioners, and that's a really interesting gap to look at.
I think it goes back partly to that issue of identity as well, in terms of, because there isn't a clear understanding and umbrella of what to be a professional teacher in further adult vocational education means, and so everything else is a bit blurred as a result. Because I included a whole range of activities that people may have participated in, and I was curious to know whether directive or did they apply or did they not take part. That may have spurred them to think of all of those things as CPD, and they may have changed. I don't know if they went back and changed their answers, if they went, because it was an online survey, so they could move around it before submitting it. So that may have predicated some of the expectation and definition, but it was a very broad. The only thing I didn't include was informal self-education.
That's the difference.
So was that self-education?
Yeah, so where people can take their own reading or...
Yes.
That's where it is.
Yes, yeah. And you don't see that very often, do you? There's not a space for that, as it were, yes.
For Bally, this thing about it talked about being effective domain, I think linked to lots of things that have been said too, it's really important in time of change, and the fact that if we give them space to create their own philosophy of teaching, their own personal philosophies, then we can deal with change better than the fact that working in FE colleges we're constantly under pressure to change, and I think that's really important for me. that's recognised and that the students leave their training with that sense.
Yeah, leaving with more than just a qualification, having a sense of self, having a sense of flexibility, something that's, as you say, a philosophy that is about them, that is still there, regardless of what setting they're in, what situation or circumstance. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the hardships or the difficulties, but you have a philosophy.
You're equipped to cope.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Thank you. Okay.
I've sort of got an observation for Nick, but also to sort of open it up, I suppose. You talked about the fact that managers seem to perhaps have a trait that's selected.
That was a question.
Yeah. And I think it's a very important question, because I've just spent my first year as a manager, and what I have found has opened doors for me is the fact that I'm not teaching Monday to Friday, and I have been able to look at conferences or events and not my first thought in my head being, that's a Thursday I'm teaching, and there's very little that happens in holiday times that perhaps people could get to. And I know some colleges promote as CPD study days, and the fact that staff can have perhaps 3 study days a year that they could use for that sort of thing. And I just wondered if anyone had any examples of their college sort of almost freeing up a timetable day that staff could go out and teach.
I haven't felt someone from Northern College. We're just actually this week on the staff development week, and the whole week we set aside for different sessions. There's the staff tutors, so it's free choice. It's saying you have to go on to these things, but
I think a lot of us do that, but most of the conferences are not in July and August, or even staff-wise, that's when you want staff to recharge their batteries.
I think one point that I could make maybe in terms of the RDF programme, we recognise that this was definitely an issue. It doesn't come to me as a surprise at all that managers are more likely to participate in CPD than tutors. And that's why when Sheila and Maggie and Lawrence and myself set up the programme, managers, senior managers, had to buy into the fact that we were asking tutors to go away for 3 days. Actually, for most, especially if you're coming from Portsmouth, it's 4 days, isn't it, guys? You've got to travel there, and therefore we had to have that buy-in, and I think that that's an important step change there to for that to happen. So that's one way of doing it, but you're quite right. There's other questions there. Yes.
Just point of information that there are contracts that have 5 personal development days. Most I've seen is 10.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I would say over I think it's 6-7 years now that we've been running the RDF programme and the related programmes. We've actually, the take-up has been brilliant in terms of everybody being able to get to those conferences, but we have had the odd occasional one where you can tell straight off it was going to be an issue. Yes, yeah.
No, I was just going to say this. That's when we're looking at more is developing conferences and things in July. We have some things coming up, and I do think it's whether teachers themselves. Because we say once that time when they feel that they can give that time, they need to put down time themselves, or they, it's the holiday period as well. But that's when the CPD we're putting on in the holidays, as it were.
Yeah.
It's more retreats, environment, for that reflection.
Okay. Lorna?
Lorna Unwin, Institute of Education. I just wanted to say that I think what's very interesting about your findings is they match tons of research done on all sorts of organisations in the public and private sector that show managers always get more professional development. So I would say be very careful about going down. It's a trait thing. It's about opportunity. No, I know. Yeah, no. Yes, yeah. So there's tons of research from outside education to support what we found.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, just a question for Valley, Ben Walker from Sheffield College. Well, two questions actually. What you mentioned about leaving a teacher training program with a sense of self and a sense of confidence is how you measure that. Because interesting enough, it's written sort of research fairly recently. There's a report, Dutton 2004, NIAS, about called Catching Confidence. It's talking about learners, I think adult learners, but it's saying how its recommendation, and it's really comprehensive in its literature review, etc., that actually confidence should be a learning outcome. So it's quite an interesting thing, probably something that you came across. And the second question really is the kind of college I work in, you know, you hear the phrase so often, it's more like social work. Yeah. In other spheres, like social work or therapy, even counselling, do you think it's much more your area that you've been looking into in terms of FE is much more developed in those areas? For example, like supervision, offloading, structured supervision is very established in those fields, whereas in education it isn't, but arguably should be. So how do you measure it, and do you think have you looked at comparisons with other fields of work?
Yeah, we're looking at, we're talking about things like character, things like courage and values. That is difficult to measure. Trainee teachers scoring themselves against the ETF professional standards, and they've put themselves down for having outstanding values. How can I say you do not have outstanding values? So you're absolutely right. It's a real challenge. In terms of, well, how do we measure that? And I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
No.
But yes, in that kind of effective domain, and as teacher educators having kind of counselling skills sometimes, and then you need them, but we're not trained counsellors. But then increasingly, the trainee teachers that we have, we don't train them to be able to deal with anything. It's once they're in their organisation or in their placement, it's a case of this is a safeguarding issue. This is an E&D issue, this is prevent. These are the signs of forced marriage or whatever it is. And it's not something, that's necessarily done in teacher education, that whole kind of coaching, counselling. Unless you have a teacher training programme where there is a specific module that does that, it's not there. It's a good question though.
Question at the back. Hi, I'm Annie from Institute of Education in London. I was just going to direct my question, I thought they were all fabulous presentations, thank you, to Dominic and Alec. And you said that in the course of your research, you changed your title and your orientation numerous times, and I was really interested in that and can relate to that quite significantly. And that's why I was really interested in your choice of title in the end, how sensitive do you need to be? I just wondered, was there kind of how you were understanding sensitive? Did it have that kind of issues that Gary was talking about, kind of be effective, or just really curious as to why you ended up with that title?
Like you said, it was about 60% of the title. It came from really that particular paper, that would have been also paper in 1975. I know it's a really old paper, but it was one that we both read it and just thought it still has so much relevance. This region of sensitivity, this area where it's the gap between, what we think they can produce and what they can actually produce. So how sensitive we have to be to the region of sensitivity was kind of where it was just a bit of a play on words, I guess, in a way. Less kind of sensitive in that respect, more about how do we understand this gap, and how do we perceive this gap, and how do new teachers see us perceive it, and how do they get better at it, basically. If that makes sense.
Okay, well, I think I'll have to draw everything to a close. There really has been 3 fabulous presentations, thank you very much, and a great audience and lots of questions. But I believe we're back in the main room now, so if I could ask everybody to move their way into on. Okay, and I think one more round of applause.